We're back on NFL Live. The Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray has heard the negative comments said about him over the past 2 seasons. He had this to say about people sleeping on his team. Quote, "Let them sleep. Our job is to wake them up and allow them to realize what's going on out here. I don't even feel like I've scratched the surface of what I'm able to do in this league. Kind of being hurt the last season and a half. It is what it is. In this world, it's kind of, what have you done for me lately? We haven't won, so I understand, but I'm primed and ready to prove what I'm capable of, what this team's capable of." Don't sleep on Kyler. Bill Barnwell is not one of those sleeping on the Cardinals. He has Arizona as one of his top 5 teams most likely to improve this season, along with the Chargers, Patriots, Commanders, and the reigning Super Bowl champion Chiefs. I like that you threw the Chiefs in there, Bill. But let's go back to the Cardinals. What do you like about them going into this season?
You gotta put the defending 2 times champs in there if you can, Laura. The Cardinals on the other side of the spectrum, a team that I feel like, well, we are sleeping on a little bit. I think Kyler is correct here. The offense improved dramatically after he returned from his torn ACL last year. They were 28th in EPA per play before he came back, 10th in the NFL after he returned. And by the way, that was without a really impactful wide receiver they're adding this year in Marvin Harrison Jr. And then you flip it to the defensive side of the ball. And I went deep into my nerd cavern for this, I guess, when it came to stats on the defense. And last year, of course, so many teams were dealing with injuries at quarterback. The average team faced about 73% of snaps from the opposing team's top quarterback. So their primary guy, your Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, for example. The Cardinals last year were at 93%. That was the heaviest and most difficult schedule opposing quarterbacks any team faced at all last year. Really was only a half game of Taylor Heineke in Atlanta, a half game of Mitchell Trubisky with the Steelers. Otherwise, they were playing the number one every single week. So the Cardinals should face a more to backups this year, I think, and that will really help the defense take a step forward.
I like this pick a lot. I will say I am skeptical about this defense, but the offense, on the other hand, I think could certainly lift them to more wins, in part because of what Bill said. The second half of the season, after Kyler returned, they were actually quite efficient, and particularly efficient running the football. In fact, by some metrics, they were the best rushing team in the NFL in the second half of last season. I feel like under their new offense coordinator, Drew Petzing, they really found an identity on the ground. This was a team that loved putting multiple tight ends on the field, pulling their offensive linemen, and just bulldozing defenses. Now, if you can build any sort of consistent passing attack off of that, and that should be a lot easier with Marvin Harrison Jr. in the mix and Kyler actually coming off of a healthy offseason, well, I mean, going from top 10 in EPA per play to anything better than that, you're talking about one of the best offenses in the NFL.
Even just when we show the highlights there of Kyler, it's just worth a reminder of how dynamic he can be. He can be a cheat code when it comes to being great offensively. Defenses don't want to see somebody like that. This new on NFL Live, this is interesting from Ravens reporter Jamison Hensley. Tight end Mark Andrews back on the practice field today for the first time since being involved in a car accident on August 14th. Great to see him back and glad he's okay. Andrews and the Ravens start the seasons in 6 days. It's only 6 days away against the Chiefs. Ravens GM Eric DeCosta was asked if his other tight end, Isaiah Likely, is poised for a breakout season.
I've seen an urgency this year with him. His leadership, interaction with other players, you know, he's kind of changed from being a rookie to being a vet. And I just feel like he and Mark Andrews will be the best tandem at their position in the league and really create a lot of problems for opposing defensive coordinators.
Yeah, seems like it. What do you think, Mina?
I'd love to hear that, and I completely agree. I think this Ravens 12 personnel grouping with those 2 tight ends, Patrick Ricard's kind of a de facto tight end as well, is going to be absolutely filthy this year, in part because they were filthy last year, albeit with the smaller sample size because of the injuries. But when they had those 2 tight ends on the field, they were the most efficient grouping that the Ravens had. They were the most efficient 12 personnel grouping in the NFL with 0.57 EPA per play. And what I loved about that grouping in particular, 50-50 run-pass split. When the Ravens had 3 wide receivers on the field, they almost entirely passed the ball. When they went heavier, they ran the ball. But when they were in 12, defenses had no tells as to whether or not they were throwing or running the ball. And that is where these Baltimore Ravens want to live, with defenses in a constant state of uncertainty.
Mina, while you were praising the Ravens and their potential, and I was buying in, you might have seen the skepticism on Bill's face. He's not feeling the same way about the Ravens as he does about the Cardinals. Baltimore, I know, come on, Bill. Baltimore is on his list of teams most likely to decline this season, even though they finished last season with a 13-4 record. The other teams on Bill's list, you see him there, include the Steelers, Giants, Eagles, and Browns. Bill, explain yourself.
The Ravens are still going to be good. I just think they're not going to win 13 games. That's really hard to do in the National Football League. And it's hard to do when you have the offseason the Ravens had. They lost 3 starters along their offensive line. On defense, Jadeveon Clowney, Patrick Queen, and Mike McDonald, of course, their excellent defensive coordinator, who's now the head coach in Seattle, all left. This is a team that was so efficient when it came to the red zone last year, which is tough to keep up year after year on offense and defense. And they had the best turnover margin of any team in football. Lamar Jackson threw interceptions on about 1.5% of his passes. That's way less than his career rate. Typically, you expect him to be right more in the 2.5% range, which is about 5 or 6 more interceptions per season. This is still going to be a good team, but the AFC North is tough. This is the toughest division in football. I just think the Ravens might be more of a 10 or 11 win team. That doesn't seem like it's the worst thing in the world.
Tiny decline. Bill, stop making so much sense. We were trying to call you a hater. In Detroit this season as we welcome you back to NFL Live. After kicking off last season with a win over the champs, the season ended with a trip to the NFC Championship game. A key piece of the Lions' rise, the aggression of head coach Dan Campbell in big spots, something wideout Amon-Ra St. Brown loves.
We understand, going into games that if it's 4th and short and we're in the plus territory or whatnot, we're probably going to go for it. And so that's, like you said, that's our identity. That's all I've really known since I've been here. When it's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, and we get, we call a play that's only designed to get 6 or 7 yards, it's because we're going to go for on 4th down. So me as a player understanding that it helps me out in certain situations because I'm not trying to, my route is at 5 yards. Don't try to push it to 7 yards to get the first down. Run the route at 5, catch it. If you don't get the first down, that's fine. We're going to go for it on 4th down. It kind of has helped, I feel like, our whole offense because early on, we didn't really understand it, but, as we kept doing it, it kind of made sense. I feel like we're all bought in.
Just fantastic stuff from the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny. Check it out. She has amazing interviews like this all the time, as well as her own commentary. Amina, what else did you take away from Amon-Ra St. Brown?
He just said something right after that I thought was so important, which is, I asked him about, this organizational buy-in that he describes. It's really what you heard there when he talks about kind of understanding the intention of the play calling on 3rd down. And he said it's a lot easier when you have the same staff in place year after year. And I just think that's so underrated when we talk about teams not just being competitive, but potentially making it to the Super Bowl. That culture that's instilled that you don't have to reteach season after season. And of course, that also includes play calling. The fact that they were able to retain both their offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, and their defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, both head coaching candidates this season, is massive. Laura, I think about the Kansas City Chiefs and what I think is fair to call a dynasty at this point, or the beginning of a dynasty. Number 1 most important thing, Patrick Mahomes. Number 2, Andy Reid. But I would argue such an underrated piece of that has been their ability to retain Steve Spagnuolo, their defensive coordinator, year after year. And I really think if we talk about the Lions making it to the Super Bowl this season, that's going to be such a massive part of why, the fact that they were able to keep their coaching staff in place.
It's a great point. Bill, you heard the references there to the aggression on 4th down and the buy-in that the team has. What do you think about that and specifically how it factors into where they're trying to go?
Yeah, I mean, the nerd in me absolutely loves them going forward on 4th down. They go forward in situations where the numbers say it's great, but there is a human element to this when it comes to the results. And obviously, last year, for most of the season, the results were great. The Lions were winning games because they were going for it on 4th down, but those 2 major misses late in the NFC Championship game. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown came out in that great interview with Mina and Lenny and said the locker room's still buying in. But we've seen other teams who have been aggressive on 4th down have some pushback. I remember Marcus Peters getting almost into a shoving match with John Harbaugh, I should say, on the sidelines in Baltimore after a failed 4th down decision when they were having kind of a struggle spot on 4th downs earlier in Harbaugh's tenure. So for the Lions, I think the question is, can they keep succeeding at a high rate on 4th down? And is the locker room as bought in on those 4th down decisions if they do have a stretch where they struggle?
You know, one huge encouraging thing for Lions fans in this team, Jeremy, is the fact that pretty much the entire team that played in the NFC Championship game is back.
Yeah.
What are you hearing about their confidence heading into this season?
Well, Laura, the confidence is in their cash. They are spending like a team that knows it's going to compete for a Super Bowl. They have doled out $500+ million in extension money for key pieces, and they might not be done. They have a Lee McNeil, a young defensive lineman, that they would like to pay possibly before week 1. And so they have a product they know can win now, but is also sustainable long term. And look, they're at a point where when you talk to people around the league, and I try to sort of rate rosters and get top 10 players from executive scouts and coaches, they clearly have a top 3 roster in the NFL. You got San Francisco, you got, the normal teams like Philly, but when you bring up the Lions, hey, do they have the best roster in the entire NFL? People don't scoff at that anymore.